What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved actors sits down for what should be a simple morning interview, only to face an ambush that turns into the most shocking live television meltdown in talk show history? It only took one cutting remark about his personal life for the entire set to explode into chaos, ending with security being called and cameras cutting to black. Johnny Depp walked onto the Good Morning America set that morning with a smile on his face. He was there to talk about his latest film, a passion project he'd been working on for years. The audience cheered as he took his seat across from the panel of hosts. He waved, looking relaxed in his signature style, ready for what he thought would be a friendly conversation about his craft and his new movie. Sunny Hostin sat at the far end of the panel, her expression already different from the other hosts. While the others greeted Johnny with warmth, she had this look on her face, cold, calculated, like she had been waiting for this moment. The interview started off smoothly enough. The other hosts asked Johnny about the film, about working with the director, about the challenges of bringing this particular story to life. He answered each question thoughtfully, his passion for the project evident in every word. The audience was engaged, laughing at his stories, hanging on his every word. But then Sunny leaned forward. "Johnny," she said, her voice cutting through the light-hearted atmosphere like a knife. "I think we need to address the elephant in the room." The other hosts shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't what they had planned. Johnny's smile faded, just slightly, but he remained polite. "I'm sorry," he said. "What elephant would that be?" Sunny didn't hesitate. "Your past? Your controversies? Don't you think the public deserves to hear you answer for your actions before we sit here promoting your movie?" The studio went quiet. You could hear the audience's collective intake of breath. The other hosts looked at each other, clearly caught off guard. This wasn't in the script. This wasn't what anyone had agreed to. Johnny took a slow breath, his jaw tightening just slightly. "I came here to talk about my film," he said, his voice still calm. "That's what your producers told my team this interview would be about." "Well, I'm changing the direction," Sunny shot back, her voice rising with an edge of superiority. "I think our viewers are more interested in hearing about your character than about some movie. Don't you think you owe people an explanation?" One of the other hosts tried to intervene. "Sunny, maybe we should—" "No," Sunny interrupted, holding up her hand without even looking at her colleague. "I'm not going to sit here and softball this. Someone needs to ask the hard questions." Johnny leaned back in his chair, and you could see him trying to maintain his composure. "Hard questions about what, exactly? You're being incredibly vague." "About everything," Sunny said, her voice dripping with accusation. "About your relationships, about your behavior, about the way you've conducted yourself. Do you really think you deserve to be sitting here, being celebrated, when there are so many questions about who you really are?" The audience started murmuring. Some people looked uncomfortable. Others looked angry on Johnny's behalf. This wasn't what they came to see. "I think," Johnny said slowly, choosing his words carefully, "that you're trying to ambush me on live television, and I think that's incredibly unprofessional." Sunny laughed. Actually laughed. It was a harsh, mocking sound. "Unprofessional? That's rich coming from you. Tell me, Johnny, do you think it's professional to—" "Stop," Johnny said, his voice firm now. "Just stop. I don't know what your agenda is here, but I'm not playing this game." "My agenda?" Sunny's voice went up an octave. "My agenda is the truth. Something you seem to have a complicated relationship with." One of the other hosts tried again. "What, maybe we should take a quick break?" "We're not taking a break," Sunny snapped at her colleague. Then she turned back to Johnny, her eyes blazing. "Answer the question. Do you think you deserve to be here?" Johnny stood up. The sudden movement made everyone freeze. He carefully removed his microphone, his hands steady, despite the tension radiating from every muscle in his body. "I'm not doing this," he said quietly. "I came here in good faith to talk about a project I care about. I was told this would be a respectful conversation. Clearly, that was a lie. Oh, so now you're running away? Sunny stood up too, her voice getting louder. That's what you do, isn't it? When things get difficult, when someone actually challenges you, you just run away? The other hosts looked horrified. The producers were frantically signaling from off camera, but Sunny wasn't stopping. You think you can just walk onto this set, flash that smile, and everyone will forget everything? You think you're so special, so above it all, that you don't have to answer to anyone? Johnny turned back to face her, and his expression was something nobody had seen before. Not anger, exactly. Something sadder. More disappointed. I don't think I'm above anything, he said quietly. But I also don't think I need to sit here and be attacked by someone who clearly made up her mind about me before I even walked through that door. You don't want a conversation. You want an execution. Don't you dare try to make yourself the victim here, Sunny shot back. Don't you dare stand there and act like you're the one being wronged. I'm not acting like anything, Johnny said, his voice getting stronger. I'm simply refusing to participate in whatever this is. This isn't journalism. This isn't even a conversation. This is you, using your platform to grandstand and attack someone who can't defend themselves without looking defensive. You could defend yourself by telling the truth, Sunny said, crossing her arms. The truth about what? Johnny's frustration was finally showing. You haven't even asked me a specific question. You've just made vague accusations and acted morally superior. If you have something specific to ask me, ask it. Otherwise, I'm leaving. Fine, Sunny said, her voice sharp as glass. Did you... But she didn't get to finish because one of the producers finally rushed onto the set, trying to de-escalate the situation. The other hosts were standing now too, looking shell-shocked. The audience was buzzing with confused energy. Johnny held up his hand. No, let her ask. I want everyone to hear this. I want everyone to see what this really is. The producer looked panicked, but stepped back. Sunny looked almost triumphant, like this was exactly what she wanted. Did you ever think about how your actions affected other people? She asked. Did you ever consider that maybe, just maybe, you're not the hero you think you are? Johnny stared at her for a long moment. I have never claimed to be a hero, he said finally. I'm a human being. I've made mistakes, but I've also never pretended to be perfect. What I won't do is sit here and let you tear me down based on your assumptions and your need to create drama for ratings. This isn't about ratings, Sunny insisted, but her voice had a defensive edge now. Isn't it? Johnny looked around at the cameras, at the audience, at the other hosts. Then why are the cameras still rolling? Why didn't you have this conversation with me privately? Why does this need to be a spectacle? Sunny's face flushed red. Because the public has a right to know. The public has a right to make up their own minds, Johnny corrected, not to watch you try to destroy someone on live television because you've decided you're some kind of moral authority. I never said I was a moral authority, Sunny said, her voice getting defensive. You didn't have to say it, Johnny replied. Show, it's in every word you've spoken to me since I sat down. You've already convicted me in your mind. This whole thing was just theater for you. One of the other hosts finally found her voice. Johnny, please, we didn't know this was... I know you didn't, Johnny said gently to her. This isn't on you, but I can't stay here. I won't be a part of this circus. Sunny wasn't done. Of course you won't, because when things get real, when someone actually holds you accountable, you run. Johnny turned back to her one last time. You're not holding me accountable. You're performing. And I feel sorry for you that you think those two things are the same. Don't you dare feel sorry for me. Sunny's voice was almost shaking with anger now. I'm doing my job. Your job is to interview people, Johnny said. Not to attack them. There's a difference. And if you can't see that, then I genuinely do feel sorry for you. That was it. That was the moment Sunny completely lost it. "Get out," she said, her voice cold and hard. "Get off my set." Johnny actually smiled, but it was a sad smile. "It's not your set, but I'm leaving anyway." "Security!" Sunny called out, her voice cracking slightly. "Please escort Mr. Depp out of the building." The audience gasped. The other hosts looked absolutely mortified. One of them was trying to say something, but Sunny wasn't listening to anyone. Security guards appeared, looking uncomfortable and confused. Johnny held up his hands. "I'm going," he said calmly. "You don't need to escort me out like I'm some kind of threat." But Sunny insisted. "I want him removed from the building. Now." Johnny shook his head slowly, and when he spoke, his voice was filled with disappointment. "You know what the saddest part of this is? I actually watched this show. I thought you were better than this." He turned and started walking toward the exit. The security guards followed at a respectful distance, clearly not wanting to actually touch him. The audience was in complete shock, some people calling out support for Johnny, others just sitting in stunned silence. As Johnny reached the edge of the set, he stopped and turned back one more time. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every second. "For what it's worth," he said, looking directly at Sunny, "I hope whatever you were trying to accomplish here was worth it, because all you've done is show people who you really are." Sunny opened her mouth to respond, but Johnny was already walking away. The cameras caught him disappearing backstage, his shoulders straight, his dignity intact despite everything that had just happened. The set erupted into chaos. The producers were yelling. The other hosts were trying to figure out what to do. The audience was talking over each other, and Sunny just stood there, her face a mixture of anger and something else. Maybe regret. Maybe realization of what she'd just done. One of the other hosts finally addressed the camera. "We're going to take a quick break," she said, her voice shaky. "We'll be right back." But they didn't come right back. The show went to commercial, and when it returned, Sunny's seat was empty. The other hosts tried to continue with the rest of the planned show, but everyone could see how rattled they were. They kept apologizing, saying this wasn't what they had planned, that they were as surprised as the audience. In those final moments before the commercial break, as the camera panned across the confused and upset faces in the audience, one thing was crystal clear. This wasn't an interview gone wrong. This was a deliberate attack that backfired spectacularly. Johnny had walked onto that set as a guest, there to share his passion for his work. He had been polite, patient, even when faced with unprovoked hostility. He had tried to redirect the conversation back to what had been agreed upon. And when that became impossible, when it became clear that respect and professionalism were not going to be part of this exchange, he had done the only thing he could do. He had walked away with his dignity intact. Sunny, on the other hand, had revealed something about herself that no amount of backtracking could undo. She had shown that she was willing to ambush a guest, to break the unspoken contract between interviewer and subject, to use her platform not to illuminate, but to attack. She had thought she was being brave, holding someone accountable. But what she had actually done was expose her own lack of professionalism, her own inability to separate her personal feelings from her job. The conversation between them had started civilly enough, but Sunny had steered it into dangerous waters with her very first accusatory question. When Johnny had tried to establish boundaries, she had mocked him. When he had pointed out her unprofessionalism, she had doubled down. When he had asked for specificity, she had remained vague. And when he had finally decided to leave, she had tried to humiliate him further by calling security. Every step of the way, Johnny had remained calm, measured, and ultimately dignified. He had not raised his voice. He had not insulted her. He had simply refused to play the role she had cast him in, and that, more than anything else, had been what drove her to such extremes. The audience had seen it all unfold in real time. They had watched a respected actor come on a show expecting a normal interview and instead face what amounted to a trial. They had watched him try to maintain professionalism in the face of hostility. They had watched him set boundaries and have those boundaries trampled. And they had watched him make the choice to leave rather than participate in his own degradation. What makes this moment so significant isn't just what happened, but what it revealed about the nature of these kinds of interviews. There's a power dynamic at play, where the host controls the questions, controls the tone, controls the entire environment. A guest is expected to sit there and take it, to answer whatever is thrown at them, no matter how unfair or inappropriate. And if they push back, if they refuse to play along, they're seen as difficult or evasive. But Johnny had flipped that script by calmly refusing to engage with Sunny's aggressive line of questioning, by pointing out exactly what she was doing, and by ultimately choosing to leave rather than submit to what had become a hostile interrogation. He had taken back his power. He had shown that guests don't have to accept poor treatment just because they're sitting in the interviewee chair. The exchange had been brief, but intense. From the moment Sunny had asked her first loaded question to the moment Johnny walked off the set, only a handful of minutes had passed. But in those minutes, the entire trajectory of the interview had shifted from promotion to confrontation to complete breakdown. Sunny's questions had become increasingly aggressive. Don't you think you owe people an explanation? Do you really think you deserve to be sitting here? Don't you dare try to make yourself the victim here. Each question had been less about seeking information and more about making a statement. She had been prosecuting, not interviewing. And Johnny had responded to each escalation with remarkable restraint. He had challenged her approach. Yes. He had pointed out what she was doing. Absolutely. But he had never matched her aggression. He had never stooped to her level. Even his final words to her, that he hoped what she was trying to accomplish was worth it, were more sad than angry. The moment when Sunny had called for security had been the ultimate escalation. Johnny had already said he was leaving. He was walking away peacefully. But that wasn't enough for her. She needed to exert control, to have the last word, to show that she had the power in this situation. By insisting he be escorted out, she had tried to paint him as some kind of threat or problem. But all she had actually done was make herself look petty and vindictive. The security guards themselves had seemed to recognize this. They had followed Johnny, but hadn't actually touched him or treated him like a threat. They had simply walked behind him as he made his own way to the exit, as uncomfortable with the situation as everyone else. The other hosts had tried to intervene multiple times, but Sunny had shut them down each time. We're not taking a break. No. She had been so focused on her confrontation with Johnny that she had ignored her colleagues, ignored the producers, ignored everyone except her target. This had made the whole thing even more stark. It wasn't the show attacking Johnny. It was one person, using the show as a weapon. The other hosts had clearly been as blindsided as Johnny himself. Their attempts to redirect or de-escalate had been genuine, but ultimately futile against Sunny's determination. When Johnny had said that Sunny had already convicted him in her mind before he even sat down, he had hit on something crucial. This hadn't been an open conversation. Sunny had gone into this with a predetermined narrative. And when Johnny hadn't cooperated with that narrative, when he had refused to play the role she had assigned him, she had become increasingly hostile. Her questions had lacked any real substance. Your past, your controversies, your behavior. She had thrown around accusations without specifics, creating a cloud of implication without actually saying anything concrete. This had been deliberate. By keeping things vague, she had made it almost impossible for Johnny to defend himself. How do you respond to answer for your actions when no specific actions have been named? Johnny had recognized this tactic and called it out. You're being incredibly vague. If you have something specific to ask me, Ask it. He had tried to force her to be concrete, to actually say what she was accusing him of. But she had continued to deal in generalities and implications. The line, "You think you can just walk onto this set, flash that smile, and everyone will forget everything," had been particularly revealing. It showed that Sonny had seen Johnny's friendliness and professionalism as manipulation rather than genuine behavior. She had interpreted his attempts to keep the interview on track as him trying to charm his way out of accountability. But Johnny hadn't been trying to avoid anything. He had simply expected to have the interview he had been promised. When that didn't happen, he had tried to redirect. When that didn't work, he had challenged the approach. And when that failed, he had left. At no point had he been deceptive or manipulative. He had been remarkably straightforward about what he was and wasn't willing to discuss. The phrase, "You don't want a conversation, you want an execution," had cut to the heart of the matter. Sonny hadn't been interested in dialogue or understanding. She had wanted to take someone down on live television. She had wanted the moment, the clip, the headline, and she had been willing to break every rule of professional interviewing to get it. Johnny's observation that Sonny was performing rather than holding him accountable had also been spot on. Real accountability involves specific questions about specific actions. It involves giving someone a chance to respond. It involves fairness and context. What Sonny had been doing was theater, playing to an audience, creating drama for the sake of drama. When she had lost control and told him to get out, to leave her set, she had revealed just how personal this had become for her. It wasn't about journalism anymore. It was about power and control and winning an argument. And by calling security, she had tried to literally exert physical control over the situation. Johnny's response had been perfect in its simplicity. "It's not your set, but I'm leaving anyway." He had corrected her false claim of ownership while simultaneously refusing to fight about it. He had given her nothing to grab onto, no argument to continue. His final words had been the most devastating because they had been so measured and so true. "All you've done is show people who you really are." He hadn't told people what to think about her. He had simply pointed out that her own actions had spoken for themselves. Throughout this entire exchange, the audience had been witness to something they probably never expected to see. They had come for a celebrity interview, probably expecting to hear fun stories about making movies and what Johnny's favorite scenes were. Instead, they had watched a professional ambush that had spiraled into chaos. Their reactions had told their own story. The gasps when Sonny had first gone on the attack. The murmurs of discomfort as she had continued. The audible shock when she had called security. And the calls of support for Johnny as he had walked away. The audience had been able to see what was happening, had recognized the unfairness of it, and had responded accordingly. The fact that the other hosts had been so clearly uncomfortable and had tried to intervene had also sent a message. This wasn't standard operating procedure. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. Even Sonny's own colleagues had recognized that she had crossed a line. The producers rushing onto the set had been another sign that this had gone far beyond what anyone had anticipated or approved. They had lost control of their own show, and they had known it. In the end, what had started as a simple promotional interview had become a case study in what happens when professionalism breaks down, when personal agendas override professional responsibilities, and when someone refuses to be a victim of that breakdown. Johnny had come to talk about his art. He had left having demonstrated something even more important, that dignity and self-respect are not things that can be taken away. They can only be given up. And he had refused to give his up, no matter how much pressure was applied. Sonny had thought she was being brave and bold. She had thought she was speaking truth to power. But what she had actually done was abuse her power as a host to attack someone who had come onto her show in good faith. She had violated the basic trust that makes these interviews possible. And she had done it all on live television, where everyone could see exactly what she was doing. The cameras had captured every moment, every accusation, every deflection, every escalation. They had captured Johnny's patience, wearing thin, his attempts to maintain composure, his eventual decision to leave. They had captured Sunny's increasing aggression, her refusal to back down, her final demand that he be removed. This had been a moment of complete transparency, where nothing was hidden and nothing was spun. The audience had seen it all in real time, while I had watched it unfold without editing or manipulation, and they had drawn their own conclusions about who had behaved appropriately and who had not. What makes this story so compelling isn't just the drama of the moment, but what it says about respect, boundaries, and power. It's about what happens when someone expects you to accept poor treatment and you refuse. It's about the choice to walk away rather than participate in your own degradation. It's about maintaining your integrity even when someone is actively trying to strip it from you. Johnny Depp walked off that set with his head held high, having shown millions of people what it looks like to stand up for yourself with grace and dignity. Sunny Hostin was left standing in an empty chair's shadow, then having shown those same millions what it looks like when ambition and agenda override basic professionalism and decency. And the entire exchange, from first hostile question to final exit, had taken less time than a typical commercial break, but had created a moment that would be talked about for far, far longer.